Honestly, despite all the other popular indie horror games I've either played, liked more, or even heard of, nothing can top Little Nightmares being one of the best modern indie horror games to date. Let's talk about it. Yo, what's up guys, it's IHSGames here, and welcome back to a new video. One thing I realized is that despite me being an indie horror game channel, I barely talk about Little Nightmares. Well, I wish I could, but there's just so little to talk about. Besides, what's even out there that someone has already explained? Hey, but low-key, shout out to the best Little Nightmares YouTuber, It's Just Jord. He's a homie. Well, besides regurgitating theories and info most already made videos on, I want to talk about why Little Nightmares is one of the best modern indie horror games. The Discord has been reopened. If you want to talk to me or talk to fans who love indie horror games, as well as play some together, come join. Links in description. I do want to say some things before talking. First, when comparing Little Nightmares, we're comparing it to games such as Five Nights at Freddy's, Bendy, Dark Deception, all the popular indie horror games, because not only do they share the same fan bases with each other, meaning it'll be easier to compare with games everyone has a familiar sense of, but also I can't account for every other indie horror game out there such as Amnesia or of the sort. It'll be impossible to make fair comparisons, and even then, comparisons are subjective. Also, I am not biased about Little Nightmares. My favorite indie horror game is Bendy and the Ink Machine, so this is coming from an unbiased way of speaking. This is also my opinion, so if you disagree, let me know why in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. To refresh your memory, Little Nightmares is a side-scrolling puzzle platformer horror game following little kids in a big horrifying world having to survive unexplainable horrors. There have been 3 games of the Little Nightmares title, one of them being a mobile game, which we won't count, meaning that the series has a pretty well established story and a pretty well established theme. So, what makes Little Nightmares better than games such as Bendy or Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, it's not just story-wise, but gameplay-wise and reputation-wise as well. Little Nightmares' story does not involve any form of dialogue. Literally, there's not a single character that can talk in a game, and yet the story is told in such an interesting way through environment, character designs, animations, and everything alike. Despite many other indie horror games having dialogue, which is 100% easier to tell a story with, their stories aren't as good as Little Nightmares. Some start losing consistency, some are too vague, some get confusing, and sometimes the game just has too much dialogue. It becomes more of an exposition dump. Little Nightmares does everything almost perfectly. Not too much of everything, not too little, not too revealing, but not too vague. Literally everything. Gameplay wise, Little Nightmares has really good gameplay for most indie horror games. It's not fundamentally game changing, but there's not a lot of moments where I felt bored or exhausted playing the game. Each section tested your skills, reflexes, as well as your intellect. Intellect is one thing I want to talk about, and what I mean by intellect is the puzzles. Puzzles in Little Nightmares require you to use your brain, but not to the point where it becomes too hard for its own good. But it's not so easy that you need to turn your brain off. Most indie horror games add puzzles to their games, but since most are just there to add filler to the gameplay, they get thrown in and either feel unneeded or boring because the way the puzzle is executed isn't the best for the current situation. And even then, Little Nightmares make sure that you're not getting too much puzzle or too much of anything. There's enough cinematics, chases, stealth sections, and everything to make each part of the game fresh, or the games, if you count both of them. Games such as Bendy kills with the atmosphere, but that's all it has, so the game becomes a walking sim because it's all style but no substance. Dark Deception is really fun, replayable, and heart-inducing, but the game rarely gives you any breaks to breathe, making the game exhausting to play after a while because either every level you play back to back is an uprising adrenaline rush, or you die too often due to how hard the game can be. Poppy Playtime lacks a lot of horror, which is sad because there's certain moments in Poppy Playtime where there is horror and it does so well with it, but because they lack so much of it, it becomes just a giant puzzle game until you get to the real meat, a big old chase at the end of the chapter. The only game I can give credit for having each of everything is Five Nights at Freddy's, but even then, it's not consistent to the point where each game has a little of everything to enjoy. Each game has 1 or 2 good things it dominates in, whether it's atmosphere or gameplay, which is not consistent. Nothing is wrong with such, but it's just a more enjoyable experience for the average player to enjoy a game when it has enough of everything. Little Nightmares also have a decent likable reputation despite many other indie horror games. You can say that they're run by a big company that knows what they're doing, but even big companies can make huge fuck-ups. Little Nightmares never tried to bait people into buying cheap merch, delayed their game to an unbearable amount, treated staff in a very inhumane way, had constant drama within the community, or just outright became a cash grab. But listen, all this stuff does not represent what these games are. Controversies happen. But when a game as Little Nightmares have very little of it, despite being an indie horror game, which is known for having constant drama within their respective communities, you start to appreciate the game more and more for everything it is. With all that leads to the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching me spill my 2 cents on this lovely game. Again, this is all my opinion, so if you disagree, please comment why. And on a related and unrelated note, I really hope Little Nightmares announces a new DLC this year, so you guys can see just how amazing this game can be from an even more expanded story. Well, other than that, if you guys like this video and want to see more of my content, you guys pretty much already know what to do. If you guys want to see more of me, go check out my socials. Links in the description. This is IHSGames and I am out.